one, I'm a technical engineer, worked on automotive for a motor company for 5 years or so. And just started into really support the radio system.
And I think what was mentioned before in that, we are trying out a new system, Camtasia, and that we're actually recording the workshop and that, and we don't have cameras looking at people, and essentially for someone when they get the presentation, they'll see the PowerPoint presentation, and they'll hear the vocals to go along with that, along that line. And that, so I guess just kind of give you a little bit of background for why we're doing this workshop. Back in the late 90s, IEEE saw, well, IEEE is a technical society, but it's also a professional society too. If you look at surveys and statistics, and that an engineer's success in their career is just the soft skills and interpersonal relationships are just as important as the technical skills that you learn in college and learn on the job. So it was felt needed to provide members these additional training. And so it was in 1999, they had a Teach the Teacher program down in Atlanta, Georgia. And they had two programs, one on leadership development, one on project management. And I represented Region 4, which is North Central United States, and at the leadership development workshop. And so I committed to do similar workshops around the country. Of course, that one was taught by a Ray Finley, who's a professor at McMaster University in Canada and a past IEEE president. And it was geared to be like a day-and-a-half program. Well, I determined that was way too long, and that people don't have the time for that. So we tried to break it down to a much more manageable program you could get down into a good part of the day, but still give you enough time in the morning and the afternoon along that line. Because they saw the need for some of these particular skills. For example, I know I had heard and read from some people that in the past, the only real training in leadership they got was either at Boy Scouts or the U.S. Army. Other than that, there really wasn't any really leadership training for people. For example, I know how many here have their MBA? Anyone? Raise your hand. So there's a couple have your MBA now. Of course, I got mine a long time ago, as you can tell from the gray hair and the beard. But, I mean, the emphasis was on marketing, accounting, management, finance, things like that, but there really weren't any classes or programs on the leadership, per se. And universities became aware of that when they started getting feedback from companies that, yeah, you're turning out managers, you're turning out engineers, but we need people that are leaders. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to take the initiative to do things. And so it's been probably a little better than 15 years ago when many of the universities started incorporating leadership courses and programs into their MBA program, and also into engineering programs and other programs that are out there. And they're working on expanding those programs. And so hopefully our existing students are getting some familiarity with leadership skills. Then also, if you look at particular standards organizations, looking at leadership, how many here have your PMP, your Project Management Professional Certificate? I thought there's someone out there.
I took the course, but I never certification.
Yeah, I took the course too, but I never took the class. And but that's a certification program for project management professionals, and it's a certificate like a license along that line of that. And they have a big part of their guide talks about interpersonal communications, which is a major part of what we're discussing today, and they talk about things. But I don't know if anyone knows that there's actually National Society of Professional Engineers put out an engineering body of knowledge. And they have in there a number of different areas that you should have some familiarity with. And one of the handouts you got out there that was a single sheet includes the capabilities that on the one side, on the other side is kind of a discussion of what they look at as leadership skills. So it's a nice little reference along that line. So, you know, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background why we're doing this and hopefully you'll gain some information out of it. We'll be concentrating in particular areas. Now there are, if you look in some magazines and on the web, there's some other workshops on leadership development you can go to. They're like a couple days long and in Chicago or somewhere, and cost you a few $100s. Well, we wanted to keep it local and economical for people. And we didn't want to hurt the pocketbook. So hopefully, I'm not saying that this is going to be equal to a 2-day program in Chicago, but I think you're going to get, and what your appetite to enough information that if you want to pursue further some additional education, there's lots of books out there on leadership on that, and also some of the additional workshops if you want to really get into it more in depth than that. But I think you'll get a good kind of rounded on that understanding of some of the things that you're going to be talking about. So why don't we move on to the I'll get my wireless clicker here, make life easier for me. So talk about a little bit about what the content of our workshop is. And usually I project myself enough of that, and it's a small room, but if I, for some reason, start talking a little bit too soft, just tell me, hey, Don, speak up a little bit more, whatever. So we're going to talk a little bit about our content, our definition of leadership, interpersonal effectiveness, talk about leadership and attributes of a leader, differences between management and leadership, and getting into being a leader and holistic communication. Then we're going to get into 3 main areas of human interaction that we're going to be talking about. One is interpersonal communication, and we're going to be talking about personalities, we're talking about motivation, team building, coaching, things like that. Second item is going to be an area of conflict management. And there's essentially the Thomas Kilmann conflict styles. There's 5 different styles of conflict management we're going to be talking about. And finally, we're going to be talking about problem solving and decision making. And there's a lot of different techniques out there. KT or Alamo are very similar. You have cause mapping and a number of other ones, but brainstorming is a big part of this. And we're also then this afternoon going to have a little exercise where you're going to be in teams of people dealing in a survival situation. Oh, hi, Carl.
Hi, Don.
So, I saw this little cartoon in the Wall Street Journal, and I thought it was kind of funny that, for the leadership seminar, next we'll learn about ducking blame. And well, actually, being a leader is just the opposite. And if you have a team of people and someone from outside the team has some issue, you want them to talk to you, then you'll work with the people on your team if you happen to be the particular leader. But you don't necessarily want them to you don't want to throw your team members under the bus and have someone talk necessarily directly to them, but find out the issue and then deal with your particular team member directly. So I thought this was kind of funny, and that we're starting off our particular workshop, our seminar. And what I'd like to ask in that is, there's a lot of different definitions for leadership you can see out there, looking at different literature or websites. And I would like someone to suggest, what do you think your definition of leadership, or what's an element of leadership? Anyone want to bring forth some suggestion?
Leadership is dividing the people who drive it in
Yeah.
action.
That's true, and yeah, you'll see as we get into the leadership styles, there's like a guidance approach, and then there's an enabling approach, and that's so trying to get that to the, and yeah,
Empowerment,
yeah, that's part of it as well.
Leadership is about connecting with people.
That's right, that's right.
Mentoring.
Yes, very much so. Anyone else want to offer anything? Well, like I say, there's a lot of different definitions out there that have different elements. The particular definition we're going to use in that is the ability to influence others. Now, in other words, you have an impact on other people. You can influence, how they deal with things and what they do with or without authority. See, most of the times people think of a leader, well, the leader of an organization, the leader of a department, something like that. But it doesn't have to be. That's why I ask people, what types of things do you do outside work or your family? And that you have an opportunity to function in a leadership type of a role in a lot of different aspects of your life. Say, just for your family, if you have kids, you need to be a leader working with your kids so they don't run all over you. And along that line, or you could be a committee with, say, a community organization, and you need to, at different points, exercise some leadership skills or take control of a particular situation or volunteer to do something that requires some help from other people in that, and you got to be able to influence people to work to help you accomplish that particular goal. And so that's what we need to look at. Most of my discussion may center around more of a business type of atmosphere, but we need to realize that there are a lot of ways you can serve as a leader. Like I mentioned before, I was an adult leader in Boy Scouts. So you're working with the boys and your particular troop or organization to get particular things done. You actually get them to be the leaders, but you give them a mentoring type of support along that line. And in this particular case, and we're talking about that really anything along this line that has to get done, and that it takes some human effort, like it was mentioned before by one of the volunteers, and that you're mentoring people, helping people move along, but you're depending on other people to get things done, and to help to do that, we need to exercise particular human interaction skills, interpersonal communication, conflict management, problem solving, and decision making, as I mentioned before. But before we get into those three elements, I want to talk a little bit about leadership. You want to be really effective in doing that, and a person has to keep certain things in the back of their mind and be aware of things. And we're going to look at three particular items of really related to interpersonal effectiveness. A certain awareness a leader has, abilities that a leader has, and a commitment that a leader needs to have. And I've always talked about as being the three legs of a milking stool to do that, but most people don't know what a milking stool is now. So I'll just say three legs of a stool for stability, and that will help in your effectiveness and influence people and being a leader. First one is awareness. It's the state of consciousness. It's understanding the fact that you're in a world where what you do and that influences and has an impact on other people. You don't live in an ivory tower separated from everybody else. So you got to realize that what you do, the actions you take, do have an impact on other people, and you got to realize that, and so you have to take into account what is that impact going to be, and that is going to be good or bad. Is it going to be to the benefit of where we want to go in our particular goals? So you really need to take that into account. You have to have that awareness of other people around you. I'm going to talk about ability. And obviously, as engineers or IT people or whatever, we learn particular things, both in school and on the job. And that's very important to our success in getting things done. But as I mentioned before, the soft skills have as equal an importance on how you get ahead in your particular career. And so we're going to be concentrating today looking at the skills relative to interpersonal relationships and how we deal with people. And there again, that is the ability we're going to be talking about, how well we do in the, the ability to communicate with people, to resolve conflicts, and to problem solve and make decisions. Now this particular slide I have under commitment, and it kind of goes back to awareness as well, that we talked about 2 slides earlier. But I guess, how many here remember and this has been a few years ago, I may be showing my age, and that's the movie City Slickers with Billy Crystal and Jack Palance. And I got at least 1 person remember, 2 person remember that particular movie. And where some guys are having midlife crisis, so they go out to a dude ranch out west. And Jack Palance plays the old codger cowboy in that, and he kind of gives them advice and that to help them. Why am I working as a dentist, and why I'm doing this, and why am I doing this? Why do I exist in a sense along that line? Well, then Jack Palance kind of says, you got to find that one thing in your life that keeps you moving and going. And so that's kind of what we have here. And that for leaders, the one thing that leads to maturity is the fully aware recognition that one's decisions make a difference, both positive and negatively, in the life of others. And I kind of referred to that 2 slides earlier, that what you do does have an impact on people. And for example, how many Trekkies do we have here? Any Trekkies? Okay, we got a few Trekkies here now. If you remember the movie on that Wrath of Khan, or Ricardo Montalban, and that played the leader of a superhuman race of genetically modified people. And sort of the end of the movie, when he's about ready to trigger the Genesis machine, and at the Enterprise crew is trapped on a ship without propulsion to get away, and if the Genesis machine is activated, and that to create a new world, it would destroy everything else around it. So they needed to do something. Well, Mr. Spock made the decision in that he saw that the good of the many was better than the good of the one. So therefore, he sacrificed himself. He made a commitment to take an action that would save everybody else, but obviously he died because he was exposed to the radiation in the reactor. And so he made a commitment to take an action that affected other people for the good by sacrificing himself. Now, most of us are not going to run into such a dire situation as that, unless maybe you're in the military in a war zone or something like that, then you may run into that. But most of us run into other lesser situations. But any team or task force or committee or anything you're involved in, if you're taking a leadership role, you do have to take that into account. What is the impact of what we do? What's the impact on the company I work for? What's the impact on the customers I deal with? Yeah.
Now, how do you make a decision if you don't have all the necessary information and, not become indecisive? How do you know?
Okay. Well, I think you don't want to make snap decisions, but
Right.
That's why generally you put together like maybe a team of people, or you have a committee of people, and jointly come to hopefully some sort of a consensus as to this is the way it's going to go. And we're actually going to get into a little more discussion on that when we get into interpersonal communication. Where you got to realize that you got a lot of people out there. We're not all the same. and you need to deal with people of different personality characteristics. And actually you want many different people like that on your team. You don't want everybody to be in the same characteristics, or you all have a certain mindset. But yeah, that's why you want a team of people working together, and so you can draw in on their experiences and input, and hopefully come up with a better decision based on consensus. But I look at the situation. Say you're a small business owner, okay, and you have so many people working for you now. Well, you hit a recession point, and then business starts to slow down, and you have to lay off a few people because just the business won't support it now. Obviously, there you're having a negative impact on the people you're laying off, but you're having a positive impact that the people you're still being able to maintain on your payroll. So you got to look and see that you got a certain balance there you have to deal with. Another movie example relative to commitment. I don't know if people remember the Untouchables movie where Kevin Costner played Elliot Ness and Sean Connery played Jimmy O'Neill, Blackfoot cop in the Chicago Police Department. But in this, it's another case of commitment in that after a particular unpleasant raid situation that Ness comes to Jimmy O'Connell on that, for some help. He needs someone to help him on that to address the problem of drinking and prohibition in Chicago. But then Jimmy O'Connor asked him, "What are you prepared to do?" And Ness says, anything I have to do to make this right. Then Neil says, as it mentioned there, that people know where the problem is, but they're not willing to do anything about it. You said you'd do anything to make it right. Now I want to help you. You made the commitment. In other words, Ness made the commitment that we're going to do this, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it. So this guy was an honest cop. And Senator said, okay, if you're going to make the commitment to do it, and I think what you're doing is right, so I'm going to help you on that. But you made the commitment to do it, and not a haphazard thing. So that's one thing you got to look at with the leader. You have to have that commitment that we're going to work towards our goal, work towards the end result of whatever effort we're doing, that our project team, our task force is doing, where we want to go to. You have that commitment that we're going to keep on working towards that goal. Okay, we're going to talk in general terms about leadership now before we get into the particular human interface aspects of communications, conflict management, and problem-solving decisions. Here, you'll see I have throughout the thing some different cartoons or whatever now, like I add in a little color instead of all black and white. And also, don't be afraid if you have a question about something and that you want some clarification, you don't agree with something, or you want to emphasize something, don't be afraid to raise your hand. And if I don't see you, or if I ignore you, say, hey, Don, I got something in that ad, something like this. You see all these promotional and posters you see around at offices and that motivational ones. I saw this one here because you also have some ones that are funny ones, and this one has, and it may be hard to read, but leadership, it says, nature's way of thinning the herd. And you can see the one guy is ready to go off the cliff, and then followed by another one and another one. So, I mean, we're not out to throw leaders underneath the bus or anything, or be over and get rid of them now. But it's just a point that if you take a leadership role, are you shooting yourself in the foot sometimes? It's part of the kind of imply. But some attributes of a leader. There's whenever we have lunch here, you're welcome to take a look at some of these books I have up here now. But there's a professor from University of Southern California, Los Angeles, in the business school there. A gentleman named has been around for a long time, Warren Bennis. and he wrote a book on becoming a leader back in 1989, and it's been updated in 2003. But he'd come up with some particular attributes that a leader should have in some sense, one way or another. So I want to discuss those a little bit here, and I've added on a few other things as well, but just discuss, what you would expect from a leader, and some of them maybe sound a little bit too strong, but you got to look at it in the sense of whatever the magnitude of the committee or the team or group of people you're working with. But you need to have a guiding vision. You want to know what you want to do, where you're going, and that. But you need to establish achievable goals. Okay. I mean, so you may say, okay, I work in the auto industry, and I want to design a new car that will have 5 miles a gallon increase in fuel efficiency in the next 2 years. Well, that's probably an achievable goal. But if you said, well, I want to do one that's going to give me 1,000 miles to the gallon in 2 years, that's probably an unachievable goal. And so you're kind of putting yourself in a position to lose, and it's going to be a lose-lose situation where it's going to be discouraging for the people on your team because you're not being able to make that goal. So you need to have achievable goals. You need to have a passion. Now, if you're kind of a person that's real quiet and people don't have a really vivid impression of you, and that they're not necessarily going to follow you enthusiastically. So you got to really have some real interest or passion. Cheer on and motivate the people that are working on your team, and we're going to work on this, and we're going to move ahead, and we're going to achieve our goal like we planned on that. You got to have a passion to help for people to follow behind you.
Does this equal being excellent?
What's that?
Does this equal being excellent?
On that, well, we're going to get into personality. We're seeing introverts and extroverts, and you don't have to be an extrovert on that, but over a particular point but in a particular situation, especially if you're dealing with people that you may be somewhat comfortable with, or you may be more knowledgeable than they are, then it's a little easier to deal with confidence and deal more with a passion. But no, you don't have to be an extrovert. You can be an introvert too and still be a leader, and that does not exclude you. But people have a tendency to think that people that are extroverted have charisma, and obviously people have different characteristics. So people, because of their outward expression, some people may have more of a persona, and that to have an impact on people on that. But it doesn't limit anybody from being a leader in any particular time and any particular role. It's situational, and we'll talk about that too as far as situational leadership. Attributes, I kind of group these three together. Integrity, honesty, and trust kind of go together. They're interrelated. And essentially you want to make promises you can follow through on. If you make promises and then say, well, we'll get this done by next week, and you continually never get it done, and it drags out, and people are not going to have confidence in you to follow up and do things in the future. And honesty in both your professional and personal life. Unfortunately, we see all too often situations of sports personnel, stars, or those in government and public service that should be examples for us in their personal life as well as their private, as well as their professional life. And we run into so many situations where they don't live up to those expectations.
A little bit of ethics is involved in that.
Yes, absolutely. So, you need to put yourself out. Just like I'm saying that I'm a Boy Scout leader, okay? Now, but the thing is, I don't want to read in the paper where our scoutmaster got arrested for embezzling money from the company or something like that. That is not what you want to see from a leader, okay? So, but like I say, all too often, unfortunately, we see some top on that athletic stars and government leaders that in their private life do not live up to the expectations of the general public, and really a disappointment. And trust, as we talked about, and that you know, it's hard sometimes to build up the trust of people that are working with you, but unfortunately, it's all too easy to lose that trust if you don't meet up to their expectations. Talking about curiosity, obviously, leaders are learners. You know, no one has infinite knowledge. That's why you want a good team of people, or committee of people, or task force of people working with you on that, and drawing on all those other experiences and knowledges to help hopefully come up with a better decision on what you want to do in that. On that, you need to learn from other people at risk. Okay, now there's no guarantees in life. Okay, and that you have to take risks. If you take the safe way out all the time, you may never get to where you want to go. You have to sometimes take some risks, but they have to be reasonable risks. And you're going to make mistakes sometimes, and you learn from those mistakes. You know, just like the example of, they talk about Thomas Edison, in Menlo Park, and inventing the incandescent light bulb. A reporter or someone asked, well, what about these 1,000 times on that you failed? And he said, well, that's just 1,000 times where you learn you can't make a light bulb that way. But we'll find the right way eventually. Yeah, Carl.
In the previous slide about integrity,
Yeah.
An example I always had is, whatever you do, would you be ashamed if it was on the front page of the newspaper next day?
And your mother read it.
Everybody.
Everybody read it. Yes. But that's a very good point. I like you bringing up that analogy. That's a good one. Very good one. Okay, and like I mentioned before, you can have failures in what you're doing in that, but you want to grow and gain from those particular failures. You want to stretch yourself and innovate, find new ways. And as if one approach doesn't work, well, let's try another approach to dealing with a problem. And also, you want to fail fast. You can get too tied up on a situation in that, and it'll stymie your progress. And you need to move in an expedited way to get beyond that failure to work to another method. When it fails smart, you want to learn from what you well, okay, we can't do it this way, well, now we'll have to try something else. And you want to fail with integrity. In other words, you don't want to throw your teammates under the bus or somebody else under the bus. You want to essentially identify, well, now this is what happened. Yeah, there's an issue, and we'll deal with it. And another one in that, and there's some duplications of some of these in that, but the dedication in that you have to be dedicated to your purpose, and also dedicated to the team of people you're working with, dealing with. Charisma, I think we talked about that earlier before. You were talking about extrovert along that line, and it's kind of something that's hard to develop, and some people develop it more with the idea of the passion, but you have to have some humor and some humanity in that, and familiarization with dealing with people, and that, so people feel comfortable dealing with you and are motivated by your actions. And I think the last attribute we're going to talk about is listening. Like, it kind of goes back to our learning before on the last slide. And you need to listen to the people you're dealing with, and you can't ignore input. And because people can have some valuable input, like we mentioned, you don't have infinite knowledge. You want to learn from these other people, and you got to listen to them, and not just the information, but also how they feel about things, and about how they feel about you as a leader, how they feel about your team, the progress of the team, how their fellow workers are on your team. Yeah.
Where does empathy play in this? Do you have to have a little bit of empathy, emotional type?
Yeah, and that's you have to deal with people, especially on your team, in a sensitive manner, and that, because the thing is, you don't, on that, if you alienate people, on that, then they're gonna be less willing to work with you in the future. And that's why we talk about being a leader and not a boss. A boss sometimes is get the stuff. And a leader says, well, let's talk about this and see what approach we need to do to move forward in this particular area, something like that. But you need to work with people in a sensitive manner, yeah.
Empathy, I think, of part of listening, but it's also a case where if somebody in your room offers a suggestion, you don't shoot them down. That everybody's suggestion is their suggestion, and you accept it.
That's true. And I will get into that later on when we talk about problem solving and decision making. And all those particular tools, usually brainstorming is the first step. And you never reject any idea. And later on, you do a kind of cut to find out which might be better, and others based on consensus. But no idea is a bad idea at the very beginning until you've researched it further. Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit, and I mentioned earlier talking about what schools had before in the MBA program and the business program on that. I want to talk a little bit of the difference between a leader and a manager. And this is just a definition out of a dictionary. And that the person who's followed by others is a leader, and the one that administers the business is a manager. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of different definitions of leadership out there. And this happens to be another one. Let's hear the ability to develop a vision that motivates others to move with a passion towards a common goal. I think you'll see some of these key words here we mentioned in the attributes of a leader earlier. But you're motivating people to move in a new direction. Whereas management is the ability to organize resources and coordinate the execution of necessary tasks to reach a goal in a timely and cost-effective manner. So it's very more of a hard skill type of thing. We're going to follow procedures. We're going to hold a company line. We're going to do things in a prescribed manner. Here's a little different approach. Leadership seeks improvement through change. So it's kind of a somewhat a degree of disorder in that. And management seeks stability and predictability. In other words, here's our written procedure. We're going to do it this way. Here's our schedule. We're going to follow that exactly. No deviation. This is our budget. Can't deviate one penny from the budget. This is a nice one I saw. I saw it in Warren Bennett's book there. And also I heard it in a couple other ones. Is leaders do the right thing. In other words, putting you in the right direction for the future of your company, your group, or whatever that. And managers do things right. In other words, here's the written procedure. I'm going to do it exactly by the procedure. So the emphasis is leadership is more looking at soft skills, interpersonal communications, relationship, and management is more the hard skills of scheduling, staffing, project controls, things like that. And here are just some various attributes of manager, and I'm not going to read through all of these things, but just, for example, develop a schedule of a project, estimate costs involved, and your annual evaluations. Here's just a few other ones too, a few other attributes. Report to senior management, perform administrative tasks, monitor progress. So they're rather structured management type of activities. I like Dilbert cartoons. So I don't know if does anyone have any trouble reading this particular cartoon? And it has to do with elements of management. I'll give you a minute to that if you want to. Everybody else is close enough to the screen now. like, you know, the employee comes in and tells his manager, you do all these things and things to motivate me, and at the end you may get some great productivity out of me. And the boss kind of listens to all this stuff, and then he says, leave my office and drop dead. And the employee says, you know, that helped me learn and grow. And so, you know, it kind of goes in the line of, you know, a person as a particular manager exercises these management skills, it's supposed to motivate people. But what we're emphasizing today is not necessarily being a manager, but looking at being a leader. Not to say that one is right or one is wrong, because they aren't. And that you really want to have managerial skills and leadership skills, and develop those and apply those where they need to be applied. So I'm not saying one is bad and one is wrong. I'm just saying there are two different areas or aspects you need to address, and two different areas in that. But you want to have leadership skills, but also you need to develop management skills as well. And but like I mentioned earlier, in the past, too many business schools and working in MBA programs emphasize more to management, but really did not get into the leadership area and dealing with people and resolving issues. It's more the hard skills as opposed to soft skills, and we're trying to emphasize the soft skills on that, what we're dealing with being a leader. I like the one down here, if you've never met a challenge, you will never find out what you're worth. And that's so, you know, there's no guarantees, you know, there's not a simple answer to everything. So you got to be able to deal with a challenge and gain and overcome that challenge. And here's just talking about kind of a recipe for being a leader, and that, you know, you need to feel you're in control of everything, and need to, and I think we talked about before, you get credit wherever it's due, need to be compassionate, the empathy when you're dealing with your team, accept blame, you know, that initial cartoon I talked about, you learn from mistakes, and take the blame for everything that happens in your unit. Then you'll deal with the people in your unit if you need to. You had a question, yeah.
Can you say more about the control?
Okay, well, I guess, I mean, to be realistic, we know there are things that are beyond our control or outside of our control. But I guess it's taking an approach that in dealing with a particular problem, we need to feel we have control over the situation, that we can have an impact on the way we're going on a particular path that we're assigned. And that's so, I mean, you have control over your actions, you have control over how you deal with people, and you have a certain amount of control on that over other people that may be sitting outside your family. But you need to feel confident that we're not just wasting our time, or we have the ability to change things and go in a different direction or achieve our particular goals. So we do have control. We can't just say that someone else has total control over us and what we're doing has no impact and we have no ability to change things. We need to take the approach that, yeah, we can change things, we can do things, and go towards where we want, achieving our goals, that we do have that ability.
How would you compare that in a leadership role versus a management role?
Well, a management.
It's a different dimension.
Yeah, well, it is, because in management, I'm talking about, like, say, you're dealing with existing procedures, so I got to do things this way. And I got to do step 1, do step 2, do step 3. So, well, the leader may say, well, we got to go in a different direction and forget what the book says. And I want to go in this direction. So what do we need to do? What can our team do and to achieve that particular goal, going in a different direction, be more creative, more innovative, instead of just following the rote book, going with the steps on that one. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. Here's a couple other things to keep in mind, and that I especially like the last one. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty doing what you make the coffee. In other words, don't ask someone to do something you're not willing to do. In other words, on that, I know I do the situation of when our Boy Scout troop and at a camp and that we're looking to about ready to leave after we take down the tents and everything, and we police the area where we form a line of people going back and forth along that and pick up any trash or everything. I get in a line with the scouts, okay? I don't just say, you do it. Get in there and then do it too. And so I'm out there picking up trash and everything. So you want them to do a job, you gotta be willing to do the job yourself and that. Or, you know, there's always the thing that, well, you know, you go make us some coffee now. Well, no, I'll go make the coffee. Yeah.
An example of that is, and I think it's today, Mark Hacko, who's out of Macomb County.
Yeah.
He was promoting, and hasn't been done a long time, is cleaning up the roadway. So he's going to be out here this morning with his pick up the newspaper and bag, and he's not just directing everybody to his organization to go do it. He's in front of them.
You got to do the down to earth, the dirty work yourself too. Yeah, that's true. Good point. You're leading by example. Expecting everybody else to do it. Well, I'm going to do it too. There's a couple of other things that to save on my lump sum, I don't necessarily read everything on the screen. The letter's big enough that you can read some of the stuff. Plus your handouts on that you should have on that the copies of all the slides. So I didn't look at the handout. I'm assuming there's a set of all the slides in there. But just some things to keep in mind, and some of this is re-emphasis of some of the things we talked about before. Yeah.
On the side, is there a PDF version?
On that, if I get everybody's email address, and I can send out my presentation to everybody. It's a PowerPoint presentation, and that I can send it to everybody. And it's not copyrighted, it's nothing like that. So if anybody wants to use any information and wants to copy slides and do something themselves, go right ahead. And as far as I'm concerned, it's public domain. Yeah.
I've got the slides on the PC, so someone does want them, I can just email them.
Yeah.
You post them on the section website, too.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do have an earlier version of this presentation is on the section website, but I need to update it and put in my newer version of my cartoons and everything else. But it is an older version is on the website. But then also too, and I can send it out. Malcolm and I both as long as and we should have everybody's email. I'm assuming. And then if I get just a list, I can just send it out to everybody. Because we're going to be covering a lot of things, and I know you're not going to retain all this information and all these slides and everything like that. And if for some reason you want to go back and see something, you can always go. If you had a PowerPoint presentation, you can always go back and see it. And you want to avoid some poor leadership practices as well. Taking the easy way out instead of just hitting the target head on that. Pretend you don't know what you actually do know. And I like the one fall victim to shiny ball syndrome. And what that is some hot, maybe you're working on a particular task, your team is, then some other hot issue comes up, and then you avoid working where you should be by looking at this other particular tangent issue, and not staying on the ball working on the particular task you should be doing. But there's a couple different things.
Now you're making me feel good.
Why is that?
Something more interesting comes along and
yeah. But that's something more interesting than a particular, more important task, maybe sometimes.
I think it's important that you are aware that you have a tendency to do that, so you have to work extra hard to not do it.
Yeah, I know I run into that, working sometimes too, that. You know, also when you're working with people on your team, and I like the item of being too harsh. You got to deal with people like we talked about before, and empathy, and you need to have people working with you. You don't want to alienate people. Sometimes you have to be direct with people, but you don't want to turn them off. You need their cooperation down the road. And that you need to work with you. You need to be a leader, not a boss. But then we also run into the problem of being an over-recognizer, and you need to reward an achievement rather than the effort. Because I mean, you can have someone who's doing a lot of work for you and spending time and hours and doing things, but if they don't produce anything, what good is it? Okay, you need the achievement is the important thing working on a particular project. You know, I got to get to my end point. I need to get this design done. And yeah, you spent two whole weeks doing it, but are you done? You need to eventually get the end project. And that gets us to another. This one's a little more fuzzy, so hopefully, I don't know if you can see this, but I thought it was an example of them being giving that recognition too readily, and for something that's negative and as opposed to something positive. Like, you know, he said, I'm under budget because I forgot to staff one of our projects. Well, yeah, under budget is good, but not staffing a project is not good. So are you going to reward that? And so this guy says, yeah, sure, okay, that's something to work with. I like Gilbert. Then I want to talk a little bit about holistic communication image. Image is important on that, but it's everything that you deal with, and that I know. For example, they talk about, a few years ago during the Republican primary, you had our Senator Fred Thompson was running for a while. And he was always giving a good impression of himself. And of course, now I think he's selling reverse mortgages or something.
Yeah, he was a movie star, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, actually, he was a lawyer first. Then he got into movies, like you say, movie star and then he became a senator, I think, of Tennessee, I think, if I remember right. And for a while, he was running in the primary for Republican president. But people had a good impression of him.
Who was Fred Thompson?
Fred Thompson. And people draw the analogy to Ronald Reagan, who was also a conservative, and always projected himself well to people. But an interesting thing they talk about, of course, they were both being actors and members of the Actors Guild. And so actors learn to project themselves well, especially in different roles on things. So it's part of them, yeah.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan was a socialist when he first started out.
Yeah, and then it's completely,
And Churchill was also he was a member of the Liberal Party before he flip-flopped over the creative conservative.
That's true. But there's a point of image, how you project yourself to other people, and that. And you mentioned Winston Churchill. FDR had a way of projecting themselves because he always smiled. In fact, Winston Churchill mentioned to him that meeting with FDR was like opening a new bottle of champagne. It was always, a pleasant experience along that line. And most people don't realize that George Washington was very image conscious. he designed his own uniforms and wore them, and that he wanted them to be respectable uniforms, but not gaudy. And he was very conscious of the way he rode a horse. And wanted to look in a very respectable way riding on a horse. I know they had one example I read about. It was towards the end of the Revolutionary War. There were a number of officers were together and they were almost in a mutinous type of attitude, and that because they thought they were going to be sent home from the Revolutionary War without their pay. Well, Washington then came into the meeting with them and said, well, here, I want to read you this letter from this congressman and things are going to be better ahead, and we're going to get funding and everything. And then he said, if you don't mind, I'd like to put on my glasses here, because in the service of my country, not only have I become gray, but I've become nearly blind in doing things that. But then all of a sudden their whole attitude of these mutinous soldiers changed, because then they're feeling we're just interested in money, whereas this guy is grown old, going nearly blind or whatever. What are we complaining about? So he kind of changed the whole attitude of that group of people by the way he approached them. He made them feel sorry for him. But you got to look at, for example, you give warm fuzzies. Do you feel, and do you appear energetic? And have someone that, are you in a mode of operation where people will look at you in a positive way or you hand out cold prickles, you frown a lot, you feel tired, drained of energy or whatever. How do you, are you projecting yourself in a way? In other words, if someone is kind of just, out here like talking with you, as opposed to someone that just says, hello, my name is Don Bramlett, and I'd like to inspire you to do that. And yeah, I know, you're going to sleep, Carl. But I mean, there's, everything about you in that, has, projection of how people react to you. The way you stand or sit is important. And that, for example, if you came in, put it over here. If you came in, I was your supervisor, and you came in and said you'd like to have a pay increase, and I sit here and I'll say, okay, Joe, what the heck did you do to get a pay increase? And well, they're not going to be as open as and you're not going to be as receptive as someone that says, okay, Joe, and I know you've been working hard on some things. Let's talk about how we're progressing on things and talk about a pay increase. And so someone's a little more receptive and how you approach it, and just you're sitting. Usually, a lot of times they talk about if people. Now, sometimes it's necessary, but sometimes if everybody is cross-legged, they're not receptive to. You want someone that's being a little more open and discussing. But I mean, sometimes, I sit a lot of times cross-legged too, just it's more comfortable that way or whatever. But just sometimes you get an impression, talking with people and seeing people, how people, their body language. The way you dress, and I like the idea, and hearing that your conventional ideas and or how you fit in with the company. I can remember, like I mentioned before, I worked for DTE Energy. Well, I used to work down our Fermi 2 nuclear plant. Well, then I interviewed for a job to work in project engineering in our fossil generation end of the business. So, you go for an interview, you want to give a good impression. So you look really deep with a coat and a tie and all the stuff, and so did the people that were interviewing me. Well, then then they hired me to move down to the other department. And so I go on my first day and I'm wearing the tie, sitting at my desk doing stuff. Guy comes up to me and says, "Don, you don't wear ties." Give me a little bit of advice. So I said, "Okay, well, thanks a lot, I appreciate it." So then I walked around a little bit and I said, "Yeah, more wear the tie." Yeah, I wanted to fit in with the group. I don't want to be too formal. There might be some times when you got a special meeting to go to, the management or whatever, then you want to be more formal. And then their normal thing was, forget the tie guy. You want to be business casual and sense, no shirt. I'm sorry, you do that, sure, but you had no tie and coat. Or you just had a dress shirt and pants, yeah.
If you interviewed at Google or Facebook, you'd be wearing flip-flops and shorts.
Their environment is a little bit different, a little more relaxed. But way you dress is important, and based on the particular situation you got to deal with. Google or DTE, the way you write, and how you project yourself, the language you use, in your writing, you sound like a Philadelphia lawyer or an electrical engineer, for the other electrical engineers you're dealing with. You use all $25 words or 25-cent words, and if you have the sentences that are too long that people get lost, or if you use a lot of 25-letter words that no one understands, along that line, you got to be conscious of that. I remember I used to work for a particular supervisor, and his writing skills were not necessarily the greatest, but he always had me proofread and edit all of his emails and communications going out. Then we would work together to have something that would be usable and that was appropriately readable for the audience we were dealing with. Along that line. Now, I'm not going to get into handwriting style, because I'm not an expert in this area, but sometimes you'll see that, especially for someone you see, well, actually, not so much anymore, really, to tell you the truth, because, everybody does things on the computer. Everything is printed. When was the last time you saw someone writing something out in cursive, okay? They don't even teach cursive in our grade schools anymore, okay? So I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to sign your name or anything, but everything is geared towards being on the computer.
You can't read anybody's signature anyway, so it doesn't.
No. Everyone looks like a doctor's signature. You can't read it, or little squibbles or something like that. Put an X on the line. Something like that. So I may eventually have to take this, I don't know, it's still appropriate as far as sentence structure and everything else, all the communication that you get. But
the email can make you look really bad too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm on the human performance committee for our Fossil Gen department. Mm-hmm. And part of the thing is, self-check and proofread what you're doing a couple times before you send it out. Yeah. And even a peer check, have somebody else read it. Because a lot of times you say something and you know what you mean, but that's not what it says. And having another person look to see, it can bring you, like you say, a lot of embarrassment. And sometimes it's just who you send it to. Unfortunately, people have a tendency to reply all. Reply all is not necessarily a good thing. You send information to people that shouldn't have information. So, I think overall, what we talked about is your appearance, how you sit, how you stand, how you write, and that all have an impact on how people interact and respond to you. And you want them to respond in a positive way. So you need to reflect yourself in the most positive way where you're going to get the proper response that you want. And and here's kind of the bottom line. You want to be in control of your environment, and then you want to make every setback or failure into an opportunity for success in the future. And I like the bottom. Oops. You need to dress, you know, for the person you want to be, and that you need to dress like that person, talk like that person, act like that person, write like that person. And this is kind of an overall vision, you know, where you want to be eventually in your career. Now, where do you want to go in your particular career? I kind of like the bottom one there. I want to be a millionaire. I gave up on being president of my company. That's not going to happen.
It's not going for it.
That's true. To do that. Well, I figure I'm going to retire from DTE May of next year, and maybe I can start. Okay, so that was kind of general things we talked about. We talked about qualities of a leader. We talked about leader versus a manager. Talked about holistic communication. Now we're going to get into first of the three areas I wanted to talk about interpersonal communications and interface with other people and dealing with other people, because that's really what we need to look at when we're looking at leadership, because you're dealing with other people, okay? And you may be the assigned leader of a task force or committee, or you may be just another member of that team or task force or committee, but at some particular point, it may be necessary for you to take the lead to get a particular task done. So you always have to be open to that. You don't have to be an assigned leader of a task force or a team, and that to serve as a leader throughout that activity. And it could be for a particular task on that project. They need you to be the leader to get that particular task done. So you always have to be open. You can serve as a leader, and there are a lot of opportunities for you to take a leadership role. You don't have to be an assigned leader. So first, let's get into interpersonal communications. And the reason I'm spend probably a little bit more time on this one than some of the other ones is the fact that that's really the first step in dealing with people. And there's a lot of different types of people. And we'll talk about that when we get into the Myers-Briggs type of thing. And so you have to realize we're not all the same mindset. And you've got to deal with other people of different personality characteristics. And when you put together a team, you really don't want everybody of one mindset, or else that filters out a lot of opportunities for new ideas, new opportunities. So it's actually good to having a diverse team of people with different experiences, sometimes different gender, different backgrounds, and that. So you want to have a diverse team of people working on a particular project. And so that's why we're going to be talking about personalities at first, understanding that there's people where you have to deal with. You have to take into account their character and how they may interface with what you do or say. So I don't know how many people are familiar with Carl Jung, and a Swiss psychiatrist, colleague of Sigmund Freud. But he formulated a classification of personalities in terms of type of character, such as introvert and extrovert, like you were talking about. You brought up the issue of extrovert. But then the basis on his classification, mother Catherine Briggs and her daughter, Isabel Briggs-Meyer, developed a procedure for evaluating personality characteristics. And there's a lot of different tests out there. Some of them are proprietary, but there's a lot of them that are public domain that are out on the web. And then their personality tests divided into essentially 4 pairs of preferences. How many here have taken Myers-Briggs tests before? Okay. And once we get into it, you may see where you may have taken some and didn't realize there were Myers-Briggs types of tests. And just for example on that, I'd ask, how many here besides me have worked at a nuclear power plant? Probably the only one, probably. But they used to, I'm not sure if they do anymore, but to work down at our site at a nuclear power plant, you had to take what was called the MMPI, Minnesota Multifacial Personality Indicator exam. And it was hundreds of questions. And it took hours to take. And they asked you the same question in 5 different ways when you go throughout the whole thing to find out we're trying to game the system a little bit. But people have a tendency sometimes to try to answer these questions the way they think you want you to answer them, as opposed to the way they're being truthful. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later when we talk about, I'm going to give you one to take home. We don't have time to do it here, but one to take home and that so you can evaluate yourself. Okay, but there's 4 pairs of indicators on that. And here you get into the extrovert versus the introvert, which you're talking about. And roughly about 70, they figure about 75% of the population falls into the extrovert category, and about 25% of the population is an introvert type of person. Just a little bit more detail on those. That, you know, extrovert is energized around people. You like to go do things around people, whereas the introvert maybe likes to do, or more personal, like to do things themselves. They may not like necessarily to meet a whole lot of new people or deal with a lot of people. Another set of personality indicators are an intuitive type of person versus a sensing type of person. And there's a little more explanation of those 2 items in the last 2 bullets, but they figure about 25% of the population falls into an intuitive personality character, and about 75% of the population falls in the sensing area. Third set of personality indicators, all right, thinking versus a feeling. And they think population-wise, it's probably about 50-50 for each of those, but it just happens that probably a slightly higher percentage of males end up being under the thinking category, and a slightly higher percentage of women fall under the feeling category.
Do you have any specific reference for that?
I don't right now. I'd have to look it up. I'm just going by the statistics that were presented to me in the training program. But now you have to look deeper to find out where those statistics are. And then the 4th personality indicator is judging versus perceptive, and they say roughly about 50% of the population falls on either one of these particular categories. Then what they do, and that is based on these, they come up with a matrix, and we'll see that right here. Okay, and they have it broken up, and here you can see the extroverts and introverts, sensing, and intuitive. Then they break down each of those into a particular category. And so I know they have, for example, scientists as being an INTJ type of person, and an engineer being an INTP. And they come up with those particular ones, but I tell you, and not everybody falls in that category. We're just saying that there seems to be more of that type of a person in that category. Because I tell you right now, in your handout there's not the one on the slide, but another handout where they get into more description of these types of personalities. When you come down to it, if you look at the ISJ, which is these 2 and these, ISJ here, and that you end up being like about 40% of the engineers they saw fell into that category, or engineering students fell into this category. More. No, that's the one on concept management. But there should be another one. I'm not sure what they handed out to. Yeah, there's a whole handout, including that, the following pages.
Okay.
Give you a more description of what those different characteristics of. They were too much detail that I didn't want to go over all that detail. I just want to give you a little bit of a sample, and then when you want, you can go more in depth by looking at that handout. But I find it kind of interesting. You know, they look at first some different. First they talk about like an ISJs and INJs and about looking out the feeling and thinking one and that just to give you a kind of a general feel because on that and then they get into individual the different 16 characteristics here. I found it kind of interesting, and I am more of an ISFJ person, and actually I kind of fall into one category. I kind of fall in half and half, the ISTJ and ISFJ. That's the person I am. And like I say, there's a as part of that handout, there is a test that thing about 80 questions or whatever, and then they do have a chart there for doing the evaluation to figure out, you know, which 4 letters you are. And the only thing I caution is when taking that test, because we're not taking it here for anybody else to see, then I'll take it for only you to see, okay? So you need to be honest, because like I said before, a lot of times people will take these tests and they'll answer them the way they think the company wants me to answer it. But you'll throw it off. What you need to do is you need to be honest to yourself. You need to know yourself. And then when you answer these particular questions, what is really the answer based on what I feel it should be? And or else it's going to skew up what the evaluation. You need to be honest in answering these questions.
Now you were talking about reviewing. I remember doing some programs on Match.com, single people. And you fill it out, and then you have a good friend fill it out, and it doesn't look the same. Because you see how you would like to be, rather than how other, versus how you see yourself versus somebody else seeing you.
Yeah, in fact, it's suggested that once you do this, and if you answer it honestly, and come up with the 4 lists, and you got the handout material there, ask your spouse, ask a very good friend, a significant other, or whatever, to look to see, do they agree with this? Or did you answer it like you talked about, you know, what you want to expect, or you want other people to see you as? Were you honest in your evaluation? And that's why when they talk about the correlation of personalities and what the person actually is, you know, what the test shows and what they are, sometimes the correlation isn't as great because they answer it the way they think the company or someone else wants them to answer, as opposed to the way that they really feel. Like I say, then you evaluate that yourself. Yeah.
In this case, can we say a leader is born a leader, or it depends on how the parents raise him?
No, there is no born leader.
So it depends on how the parents raise their child, right?
Yeah, how the parents, how other environment, your education, there's a lot of things. It's not just your parents.
Because if you go back to Ronald Reagan's example,
Yeah.
he said since they were actors, and Fred Simpson said,
Fred Thompson, yeah.
Fred Thompson, since they were actors, they know how to present themselves.
Yeah.
So that means that's wrong.
Now what they do is they learn to present themselves in a positive way to the audience that they're talking with.
Yeah,
Now, we're not saying it's wrong. We're just saying it's just like.
Reagan achieved 50. He ended the Cold War 50 years old.
Yeah.
A 50 years long Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So I think actor is an art. Acting is an art.
Yeah.
Living is an art of living.
Mm-hmm.
Every person who's alive, if he's not an artist in something, cannot achieve nothing.
No, yeah, you want, for most people you're dealing with, be it a spouse, a friend, someone else, you want to project it yourself positively. I mean, sometimes you need an honest opinion from somebody on something else, and you may get into more you try to project yourself positively in dealing with other
I
people.
think dishonesty comes to what the parents put in their child, right?
Oh, yeah, that does have an impact. It's not the only element, but parents do have a great influence on their kids, yes, that's true. You had something, Kevin?
I was gonna say the Cold War ended in which one?
No, the Soviet Union dissolved when Gorbachev,
He tore
Reagan,
down the Berlin Wall.
that's when the Soviet Union dissolved.
Well, the Berlin Wall came down in, under which one? 1991. Reagan left office in '88.
Yeah.
Paraphrase Shakespeare, the world is a stage and we are all but players. Now it's suggested you choose your part carefully.
That's true. Well, like I say, everyone wants to project themselves in a particular way, just like I had the example of George Washington. Here you're talking about someone in the late 1700s, and he projected himself in a particular way because he wanted to be dignified but not gaudy. And he designed his own uniforms, the way he rode on a horse, the way he dealt with people. It was, a lot of us, we dress properly, okay? And I didn't dress in my shorts and flip-flops and everything today because I wanted to be at least somewhat representative, or presentable, or whatever. But yeah, and you always want to try to present. I think most people want to present themselves in a positive way to people they're dealing with to give a good impression. And then parents have a major impact on how you grow, but it's not the only impact. Like, for example, Ronald Reagan, okay, he had an alcoholic father, okay, and Reagan wasn't an alcoholic in that, but and he had to deal with his alcoholic father, and I thought it pushed him in a different direction. And like I've seen different people with alcoholic parents, okay. Some will follow the example of their parents, become alcoholics themselves, and others say, I don't want my life being like that. And they don't touch a drink, a drop of alcohol. So you can see kids will react in a lot of different ways, and a lot of them are you just never expect.
Vice versa. Let's take my family of 5, and my parents were rarely, my mother had one time all a year, and my dad drank a case of beer a year. And I had 2 brothers who were alcoholics.
So yeah, it's life is interesting. Unfortunately, you can never really predict that. All you can do is try to push in a particular direction. But definitely, take that test sometime afterwards, and that's when you get a better feel for it. Answer the questions honestly. Come up with the categories. Look at it, see if you think that is, because they do have a little description of the 16 different categories. See if you think you fall into that. Some of them are similar, somewhat similar. And then ask your spouse, your significant other, a good friend to look at it too, possibly, and say, do you think that's me based on your relationship or interactions on that? So it's good. It's just nice doing a little soul searching like that sometimes. Now I want to talk about a little bit, and this is kind of getting into another similar area, and that INPO, Institute for Nuclear Power Plant Operators, and that they have a DISC system. That's a Myers-Briggs type of system. It's a little simplified system, as you see as we get to it. And but in the nuclear industry, they're always concerned about how people interact and getting the right decision, because it's very highly regulated, and you need to have that added emphasis of making sure things are right. And everyone agreed this is the direction we need to go. So they're very big into continuous improvement, human performance, and the personality indicators, just to get a better feel. Like I mentioned to you about the MMPI test that I took when I was going to work down at Fermi. And that, you know, it was a Myers-Briggs type of test. But they are definitely looking at the type of people dealing with that. You don't want someone way outside on the fringe. And that, but in this particular case now, in this particular area, talking about this, we're not really be talking about engineers in particular, are knowledge, I'm gonna say knowledge workers, I'll say. Doesn't have to be engineers, could be IT type of people, could be scientists, whatever like that, but I'm not talking about knowledge workers, and as opposed to a task worker, like someone at one of our plants, someone in maintenance or operations, like I talked about, you got a procedure book. If I'm gonna maintain this piece of equipment, step one is take off the screws, step two, to do this. So everything is prescribed exactly what you do to disassemble and then reassemble this piece of equipment. But as engineers, IT personnel, scientists, actually there's a greater opportunity for us to make errors because things are not prescribed. A lot of things are based on our experience, what we learn, who we interface with, on making decisions. And sometimes if you don't get necessarily all the right information, you can make some wrong decisions. So there's a greater opportunity for a knowledge worker such as ourselves to make an error in what they're doing as opposed to someone that reads something off, step 1, 2, and 3, and they have a peer check to make sure it's done properly. And but yeah, I like this particular one here that because of their personalities, engineers tend to be critical of others, but not self-critical. Well, as you know, I'm perfect. So, and
You're real wise.
so the heck with all of you, but I'm perfect, so I know that. And I think I ought to have a little humor with this. But I think, self-awareness is important in that, to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. And here's what I'm talking about, this DISC method, and why it's DISC because it's called DISC. Talk about introverted here, extroverted here, and actually, we'll see in the next page where we're talking about some of the deals, but if you actually turn this one 90 degrees clockwise, they'll line up exactly with that Myers-Briggs matrix I showed several back. And we'll get into this because as you remember before, and if you rotate that one 9 degrees, it showed engineer and scientists over here in this cause, it was in C, but turned to 9 degrees, it was over here. And here's a little description of what their characteristics associate with dominance, influence, consistency, or steadiness, and because they use letter S, and conscientiousness. And they kind of gave a somewhat of a thumbnail idea of the types of people that fall into those groups categories. Always press the wrong button. And they say like the dominance people seems to describe many managers and project managers. And whereas the influence one seems to describe many trainers and those who are human performance practitioners. The steadiness category describes many human resource administrative professionals, and in the conscientious area, they found that profile captures over 70% of all engineers. Falls underneath that the C area, and which is kind of an introverted type of person. Like I mentioned, if we go back, remember turn it around. There we go. That's the matrix there, and you turn this one around, like I said, about 90 degrees, or turn this one 90 degrees in the counterclockwise direction, they kind of line up in what the description of those characteristics are. And there's some reasons I like to do this is because the test that they use is easy to administer. It's kind of follow on the Myers-Briggs types of test, because it is a Myers-Briggs test, really. It's a little more simplified. But it's also simpler. Instead of like a 16-block matrix, you got a 4-block matrix. It's cool. It's just the two of them way easier to deal with.
But they have combinations of people also.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, if you look, so yeah, if you look at it, and you had, like on the Myers-Briggs, you had 4 blocks here, 4 here, 4 here, and 4 here. So it's just a simplified matrix. That would be the reason why they particularly choose to use this particular profile. And here's some of the identified as the characteristics or attributes of someone that's conscientious. And I think you'll see a lot of these do fall into the area of someone that's more scientific or engineering oriented or more logic oriented, if you want to say along that line, analytical. So these are sort of some of the like I say, characteristics and attributes of data. And so you can look and see, you know, do they apply to me or not? And I'm not saying that every knowledge worker is the same. We're just saying that many of them exhibit some similar characteristics. And but we need to look at that. Well, then what is the value of the conscientious person to a team? And here's some of the things that a conscientious person adds to the team in working on a particular project, task, committee. High standards, objective thinking, diplomatic, pays attention to small detail, asks the right questions, task oriented. So these are some of the things that an engineer, a scientist, an IT person brings to a project. And you know, what's a good environment for a knowledge worker to work in? Where critical thinking is needed, you know, follow assignment to completion, close relations with a small group of people, task force or team, where quality and our standards are important. I know that's always my concern as a project engineer working with firm doing stuff. I'm interested in quality. I want a good quality that can be installed, maintained, and operated without problems. Then just some ideas on how to communicate with a knowledge worker. What is a good way to approach? Prepare your case in advance, be straightforward, that's an action plan. The topic needs to be persistent, but you need to allow us, give us some space, okay? Allow us some time to look at things, to research things, to gather information, to do an analysis, using the engineering method to come to a solution. You gotta give us some space, gotta give us some time. Don't expect it tomorrow. Yeah.
I took the test while working for the BlackBerry company in Canada. And it was meant for new managers. And one of the tests was a 3-day course. And most of the people who took the course were very impressed. And they wanted to give it to their subordinates because we all learn new things about ourselves, from how to deal with other personalities, how to motivate them, how to coach them. So it was very interesting, very useful.
It can be very awakening to you if you answer things correctly or honestly, instead of trying to cover up yourself. Let me see what time it is. is lunch scheduled for 11 o'clock?
No, it said 12:30.
Oh, I was wondering, I saw her lighting up the lights there.
Yeah, she was supposed to come in at 11:30 to that, but we would set up at about 11:30. We knew there was gonna be a break, I guess, keep on going this way.
Yeah, I mean, we got a small group. If you gotta go to the restroom, you need to get coffee, whatever, don't be shy. Okay,
I got a question.
yeah,
So all this, the C branch, you said that explains engineers, what we.
yeah, there's more
So
knowledge.
I am seeing myself in these responses and I'm like, wow, okay. So I can explain how other people know how to deal with me too, basically, by definition.
Yeah, that's
Of
right.
this. So, yeah, I am seeing myself.
I know, I kind of look at it myself too, and I can see how, and I'm not saying everybody is 100% one way. They're all different personalities, but you can see a lot in engineers, IT, and scientists, some of these characteristics.
I would submit too that you should be very careful that these become tools that you can use to learn who you are, rather than use these tools to learn what you should be.
Yeah,
Okay?
I mean,
It's not a should be. This is not a, you must find your category and you must fit into your category.
no, you need to be honest with yourself.
Yes. So don't limit yourself to what this category says it's
Right.
supposed to be.
Oh, yeah, no, these are just generic types of things. Now, like I say,
But
if
this
you look
is
at the
part of the
yeah.
awareness too, though, just to be aware of it too, not to just put yourself in that word, but be aware. And that's what I'm finding, is making people aware.
But aware of other people that are different. Teaching you give them all what they might be.
Well, that's the thing you need to look at, and that's why we're dealing with, all these different people. None of us are exactly the same. Okay, and you need to learn how to deal with other people and that. And you've heard the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. The thing is, actually, a better one is do unto others as they'd have you do unto them. In other words, because you want to be treated in a particular way doesn't mean they want to be treated in the same way you want to be treated. Okay? You need to find out, how do you think they want to be treated? Treat them that way. So it's a little twist on that golden rule. They, like I said, they may not want to be treated like you want to be treated. They have their own way of wanting to be treated. Okay, I thought I brought up one thing, and that recently our company introduced a new program called the Strength Finders system, and it's actually computer-based, so you can't find any public domain tests or anything in that. But it was put together by this Clifton and Rapp, and also working with the Gallup organization. And what it tries to do is define talents. They don't look at personality in that sense, the way the Myers-Briggs test does. But it's a somewhat similar types of questions with a little different slant. But they're trying to find the strengths in your personality. And they say that there's probably at least they claim, there's a slightly better correlation using this as opposed to a Myers-Briggs type of test. So like I say, a lot of it depends on how honestly you answer questions. And people too often are not as honest as they should be in answering questions. But this is another system. And it's like I say, it's a Myers-Briggs type, but it's a little bit different. I got a book up there, and I got some other information you can see as well a bunch of times.
John,
Yeah.
you can take this with a grain a stall when I used to work with Irishmen, and they always talk about job interviews and always being able to get a job. And his philosophy was that he wasn't gonna let a little thing like a coop get in between him and getting a job. A lot of people have that attitude.
Well, there's one thing, so word things in a certain manner as opposed to just being outlined. So, I mean, you know, you see too often where some people have identified, well, I got a bachelor's and I got a master's and I got a PhD and this, and find out they didn't, and they end up losing their jobs. And they were in high profile things because they didn't have the credentials that they said they had. And then no one checked on them to find out if they didn't have those credentials. Or was it, you got that one TV series Suits, a law firm, and the one young guy doesn't have a law degree. They hired him as a lawyer. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about motivating because, I mean, obviously as a leader of a group or a team or whatever that, you want to motivate people that are working with you along that line of that. And I don't know how many people have heard of Abraham Maslow. He's an American born psychologist, and then he came up with a famous hierarchy of needs. And we'll put this up in that. And essentially, people start off wanting to satisfy their most basic needs. In other words, you know, that I have food, clothing, shelter, whatever. So am I employed? So you have most of these things. Then you start getting into meeting safety types of needs, which could be when I found a spouse to be married to, or I'm on a team at work, something like that. Or I've got a committee at this particular organization. So you kind of have a safety or security. You got a number of people to socialize with. You feel a part of a group. And actually that leads up to also the social needs, love, and that. Then you get into more responsibility and find myself actualization, where essentially you're at a point where you can act on your own and not have to be looked over, that you had that responsibility. And kind of tying that back into those emotional support needs back into leadership influence. And that kind of you have a correlation from the one pyramid, which was shown on the last page, and that was similar thing in a business environment. Security being in an organization, and that being employed, making money by doing that, being on a team, and that belonging to a team of people, and that there's a social aspect to that, being part of an organization, part of a group of people you can communicate and deal with. Then you get into the leadership or the economy. You're given a certain amount of authority. You still got an overview or whatever now, but still got to think of more of a leadership role. And then finally the trust, where they expect you do your job. You got a problem, come back and ask me, but do your job. I mean, that's what kind of the role I'm in right now as a senior project engineer. And I've been doing it enough, working on enough projects, whatever, so they expect, okay, here's your project, go do it. Report back, I want to get a status on it. But unless there's a problem, go do your job. So they give me that independence to do things my way, that obviously hopefully a productive way, and that work with the project and get things done.
I know.
Yeah.
I learned the hard way that I could have the worst type of thing to do. I learned that from my previous boss. And I'm like, wow, that's horrible. It's more work to micromanage than, like you said, to sit back and let them just report on what's going on with the issues, things like that. We kind of give them the freedom. You know.
Well, because nobody here I work with. But I tell you, 2 years ago, I left one department and went to another department because I thought the upper management was too micromanaging. And I didn't find it a very good work environment to be in, so. Someplace where I can, more independence, have faith in me to do my job.
Right.
Okay, now I want to talk about a little bit, we talk about personal interaction and because, I mean, most things you do, like we say, you don't have infinite knowledge. So if you're working on a project, you're usually not working alone. You're working on a task force, a committee, a department, team. For us, and it's usually what we call a project team that work towards successful completion of a project. So, so we need to look at, what are the things that we get out of being a team? What can we contribute as being part of the team? Why should I want to be part of the team? And there's a lot of aspects. Not every item may apply to you, but you may see some elements in here that may apply to you. But why would someone want to become part of a team? You can see that possibly an opportunity for learning new skills. You may be recognized and respected within your team. And that you may have more control of the job by the fact your team is assigned to do it. And doing something worthwhile for themselves and the organization. There's a certain fulfillment about doing a job correctly and working with a team. You either all succeed together or you don't. Kind of approach it. It's the we, not the me. We're working together. Here's certain things to consider when a team is operating well. The leader and the members are clear on goals. They're open to share ideas with other people. You listen and show respect for others. Because I mean, like I mentioned, I think several times before, you're going to be working with these people on a team, and you want to maintain a good relationship with people. You need to be open to share ideas, to be receptive to ideas, listen to other people, don't discount people. Need to be respectful of other people. And like I mentioned before, you're talking about this, the we mentality as opposed to I or me mentality. And building a team, things to consider. You want to understand and use each other's know-how, like we talked about before. No one has infinite knowledge. So you need to draw and listen to other people and share ideas and experiences and knowledge, and that to come to a correct conclusion. Know about each other's personal lives. I tell you, it's good, and it was good, having everybody introduce themselves and help say a little bit about themselves this morning. But you work on a team. It's good knowing that it's not just another name sitting on the other side of the table. But yeah. I know you got a wife, I know you got some kids, I know you got grandkids like me. So, it's nice, like I say, there's something personal about the people. Go out for a beer afterwards or do whatever you like socially sometimes. But it's good to know someone on a personal basis, not just on a work basis. I mean, you should, show appreciation for help for people. And so, you're in it together as a team. Like I said before, you either succeed together or you don't. You need that mentality and being loyal to the group, working with the group, and encourage everyone to develop. And here's a couple other items for that. Hopefully working together and coming to consensus to make a decision based on fact, not emotion or personality. And like I said, there may be a particular leader assigned for a task force, but for a particular individual assignment, they may want someone else to take the lead on doing that particular assignment. So it's not that you have to have a particular role, but you may functionally find yourself in a leadership role to do a particular assignment. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about coaching. This is another element. You can see we've hit a number of different elements. We talked about first, personality types. We talked about motivation. We talked about teams. Now we're talking a little bit about coaching here. We're going to talk about kind of group a number of elements of interpersonal communication together and how we relate to each other, working together on a task force or a team or a project. And you know, obviously, you know, coaching is to help someone find a solution to an issue or a problem. And it's not for, and we'll talk about even further, but it's not for you to dictate this is how you solve your problem, but it's to help someone or some group of people to find the solution of the problem. So they can help them find a solution. So there's an ownership of the solution of the problem, and it's not just you dictating, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. And like they say, it's really the foundation for continuous improvement. I know within our company, continuous improvement, or CI, means an everyday thing. I think that for many companies.
Is there any other way other than continuous improvement?
Oh, well, I mean, that's just a key word or catchphrase. But any company is always looking to, I want to do a better job. I want to turn out a better product. And it could be a service, not necessarily a product, could be a service, or customer service. So I think any company, it's just continuous improvement is a name that a lot of companies use as the catchphrase for the current time. And we're going to go through a few different steps of coaching that to go from the start to the finish of a particular product. But if you can, especially if you're the lead of a particular group, that you want to try to identify opportunities to help someone expand on his or her needs. You know, especially if you're involved in evaluating performance, and you want to make sure that they're doing a good job and that they're having some problems. What can you do to help them to do their job better and without less hassle? Now, sometimes people will come to you with a problem and then ask you to help and solve that particular problem. But sometimes they aren't, or they're hesitant to. So you got to be observant. If someone is having a productivity issues, you may need to go to them before they come to you and ask, how can I help you in dealing with this particular issue? But you also have to understand and know that the person is ready for coaching. If you go to talk with them a little bit and they're hostile or closed or whatever like that, well, maybe that instant may not be the right time to sit down and coach, because you want it to be a win-win situation. You want to feel it's productive, that they gather something from it, and want them to feel comfortable about what your discussions and advice and comments are. So you need to be somewhat sensitive in approaching the person, talking with them as to how receptive at that particular point in time the dialogue might be. Now, sometimes if it was a critical life or death situation, you may have to be forceful. But in most cases, it's not. It's just a performance issue that doesn't have to be solved exactly this minute, but sometimes it needs to be solved in a particular time frame. But you want the other person to be receptive, or else you're wasting your time talking. And like we talked about before, we want them to help find the solution and own the solution. So you want to offer on that open-ended questions, how, where, who, whatever, you don't want to ask them questions that they say yes or no. And you're asking for them to draw information out their perspective on a particular situation or problem that you're dealing with. And that way, if they feel they're helping to come up with the solution, they're going to have more of an ownership and willingness to pursue that solution.
Or why? Why? I think of not using why. I think of a child knocking milk off the table.
Oh, yeah, that's, sometimes people might see that as trying to assign a blame or something like that, but yeah, again, that's just, it happened. By accident.
Well, I can say there, also, I know Carl's bringing up something saying kids, but something that I work with engineers and I work with, whether it's equipment or processes or data acquisition. Sometimes the most effective way of teaching or coaching our people is to let them see what happens when it fails. Because I can try to explain, there's a reason you do this specific process or sequence so it works. However, the simplest way I found to have success is to let them actually hit. And then they see what happens and why. And when we actually do the test and get the measurement, and we don't have that happen.
Yeah, that's true, and that's very good, and that, back when we get into conflict management, we're gonna talk about that a little bit too, and that, and probably should have mentioned it earlier, but we looked at it in Boy Scouts as well. You got a lot of young kids that never been in leadership roles and patrol leaders and stuff like that. And yeah, they're not always gonna succeed. I mean, you don't want them to succeed in a terrible way that's be traumatic or something like that. But they gotta understand that you gotta learn from experience. You gotta learn, you make mistakes and you recover from those mistakes. You learn from them, like we talked about before, that one area on failure. You wanna learn from a failure. You don't want to get stymied by it, but you need to move forward with it. And like we say in the previous slide, you ask open-ended questions, give them the opportunity to help identify what the solution is. But you also need to provide some positive input as to identifying some positive actions that need to happen. Sometimes they do need some guidance, some ideas on how to approach, especially if you've had some similar experiences before yourself or know other people have had. You might be able to provide some positive input, but like I said, it's not a point where you want to say, do this. Offer some mentoring and some guidance.
Don, I want to say one thing about open-ended questions. I kind of noticed being around engineers a lot at IEEE meetings, and you sit there and ask an open-ended question. Usually you get complete silence, people kind of under their table. So you need to get some way to kind of prod a response.
That's true. Sometimes, a lot of times in that, like when I asked the question, the definition of a leadership, for a while, I had no hand up. Then once I had one hand up, then that gave an opportunity. Well, that person gave me a response, so now I feel comfortable giving me a response. So sometimes you fall into the difference. Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So with open-ended questions, isn't that how engineers draw up their requirements and things like that?
Yeah.
You have to ask those open-ended
Yeah, sure.
questions.
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, it's not just the coaching environment, but even in your team design environment or whatever, you need to be open to those, and you can't shut things out. You need to be open to them, and yeah. And then with the person or persons you're coaching with, need to get their agreement on the course of action. In other words, we're addressing this problem. We think this is the course of action, or it needs to happen. And then, okay, then when do you think we can get this done, or when will you take this opportunity to talk with the other person in the group to address the issue? So you got to get an agreement on a course of action. Something's got to come out of it. You can't just talk the talk. You gotta walk the talk. You gotta make it happen. Huh? That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. We preach we're gonna do this, or in the practice to make it happen. And then finally, you need to offer your support at the end of this particular process. And obviously, you want people as much as you can for them to solve their own problems. But sometimes there will still be situations where they need advice or some guidance or whatever. So they need to feel comfortable to come back to you to discuss other issues. And I think this is not the end of the road. I coached you one time and don't come back and never see me again. But it's the point that, yeah, I mean, we want you to solve your problems as much as you can, but if you need some help, don't be afraid to come and ask me. I'm here to help you. And another Gilbert cartoon. Hopefully everybody can read it. I like this one on peer coaching. Gilbert has sometimes a way of being a little insensitive to his coworker.
I notice she's a woman too.
Well, that's because this particular, if you read their
I can't read it.
okay, yeah. But I meant if you read the Gilbert cartoons, there are certain people that have certain different characteristics. Like this particular character is somewhat obnoxious in certain ways. And then the guy that was, telling his supervisor, he's one that doesn't want to do any work, tries to avoid work as much as he can. So each one has their own characteristics. The supervisor is just oblivious to things, doesn't understand anything. Gilbert tells him. Yeah.
I would say Scott Adams was an engineer at AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
In case you didn't know, he was at AT&T. That's what I heard. And at one point he left being an engineer because Gilbert became either having published every day, and was so successful now he stopped publishing every day because he may still do it, but at one point he said, he stopped being an employee engineer.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, like you say, so successful. Everybody loves the Gilbert cartoons. Okay. And I just want to talk a little bit about strategies, and I think you had brought up the issue about enabling or guiding people, really, guiding people. And I thought that, there's some various different leadership strategies out there, especially talking about the growth cycle of people within the company, and that are their level of experience. In this particular case, they talk about team member growth. It could be a newcomer, and all the way up to someone that's centric, can be completely independent. And can be a couple different strategies based on sometimes on your personality. Sometimes on that we can use an enabling method, and sometimes you can use a guiding method. A guiding is more of a directed method, whereas enabling is a more of giving them more room on doing things, coming up with solutions. So, for example, like I mentioned in guiding mode, starting off a newcomer, you gave them more advice, then you build up as you go on, being coaching and facilitating your work, and finally just giving them some direction, and you go do it. Whereas enabling on that is we're giving them more space to do things, so you're providing them some information, but giving them some more control over how they approach an issue. And then as they grow up in the organization experience, you encourage them to move forward on their projects. Then you may, if they're more independent, then you may promote their activity and working with them and promote them to other people in your organization. And then finally endorsing what they do, and then where they have a higher level of independence in doing things, and you're supporting what their activity is. Unfortunately, this one is not one you read too well. They call it life situational leadership. But if you've looked in Kirchner's book on project management, a couple of authors in that refer to this as life cycle management. And it's based on more directive behavior versus supportive behavior. So especially like referring back to the last slide, and especially with someone new, you may provide more directing of them because they don't have the experience or know-how on doing things like that. But then as they move along, then you may find yourself more in a coaching role. They're giving an assignment and I'll give you some guidance, but I need your feedback and your input along this line. And finally, you get into the point that you have is high supportive and that low directing, where you're supporting their activity, you're giving them an assignment and providing them some guidance as they need it, but you expect them to be more independent. And finally, you got the delegating where you give them an assignment and expect them to go carry it out on their own, and as they have problems, come back and we'll address them. So I wanted to throw in a couple of these because you're going to run into different people, sometimes have different leadership strategies, and especially the enabling versus the guiding. You kind of realize that sometimes people find a guiding strategy a little bit too restrictive, and they prefer an enabling strategy. Okay, let me see. What time did you say lunch is?
I started at noon, so about a half an hour.
Okay, so let's get through this then before that. Then we'll have lunch, and then we'll go through problem-solving, decision-making. Then we can do our exercise, and hopefully get out here a little bit earlier than we had planned on. But conflict management, of course, builds on to interpersonal communication, sincerely dealing with people and resolving if you got a conflict between ideas and whatever. I'm not saying conflict is a bad thing, but it's just you deal on a project and you're going to have different ideas on it, and you kind of come to a solution as what the best approach is. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And sometimes depending on the situation, and that you can have an issue and people address it emotionally, and sometimes you have a triggering event, which is a negative type of activity, or you may have a little more, I wouldn't say violent, but a little harsher disagreement, and you have a conflict on the issue, an argument, say, per se. But then, as a result of that, you may not really solve the issue. You may have some particular consequences for that, and the issue may still be there, and unless you come to a real good agreement and resolve that conflict. But you know, too often you'll find that people get an argument and they go to different ways, and not for a couple hours to get it better and that talking. So you want the conflict management to be positive as much as you can.
Don, can you go back and give an example where that occurred would apply? Oops. What kind of situation would this bell curve kind of thing?
Let's say an extreme where a love triangle, and so it doesn't matter which it is, but then two parties in that, you know, first get into an argument, and well, they are aware of the issue, and the triggering event is they're together, and they argue on the issue and whatever, and that, and get a conflict. I mean, they even would go to a point of getting a fist fight or whatever, or a conflict, and then someone may call the police and break up the fight. They're both thrown in jail overnight or whatever now, but the issue still exists. There's still the love triangle. Well, I mean, that's an extreme. So a couple of psychologists, Ken Thomas and Ralph Kilman, came up with a conflict handling modes or styles. And this is fairly well known. In fact, when I took the course for taking the PMI exam, they had the same conflict style as described in our training material. And here's the 5 conflict modes based on whether you have a cooperative degree, uncooperative, cooperative, or assertiveness, being unassertive to assertive. And then you got avoiding, opposite of that is being collaborating, you got competing, and the opposite of that being accommodating, then in the middle, a compromise. And we'll talk about why compromise is not necessarily the best approach to dealing with conflict resolution. And here's a little example, at least, of 3 of the 5. The next slide will show the other 2. Give a little explanation of what that is. Accommodating seeks to satisfy other people's concerns at the expense of your own. And but you know, that's for an example, and talking about delegating information. And you may have people working for you, and you may have one approach and they have another approach, but you're going to accommodate them to try their approach to give them opportunities or fail or succeed using their approach. Competing, and that obviously you're taking a much more assertive role. Avoiding, you're kind of avoiding the whole issue. Collaborating, to talk about is more of a cooperative and assertive approach, and compromising is a middle road. Find the middle ground to set the partial, and I think that's important. Middle ground to partially satisfy both parties. And the problem is there because you're only partially satisfying and not fully. And a lot of times on a compromise, you don't really get a buy-in of the solution. And if you don't really get a good buy-in from both parties, then there's little chance of that solution succeeding because they don't buy into it, they aren't committed to it. And here's examples of when to accommodate the other people's side. When you realize you're wrong, that okay, and that my approach isn't going to get us where we want to go, and it appears that your approach probably will, so let's go with your way. And I like when the issue is more important to the other person as well. And you may find it's better to give in and say, okay, well, I'll take your approach and mine, but it's more important. And one I like is when you need a future favor, I kind of think about in politics and in Congress. In other words, you know, I'll scratch my back if you'll scratch, I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch mine. In other words, I can accept and I'll vote on your bill if you'll accept and vote on my bill. So, you know, that's kind of an
We call that compromise.
Some examples of when you want to compete, when you need a quick decision, and so you got to argue more for your particular case, or whether you think it's really a very important issue where you have a strong feeling on that you need to get your side and hopefully the team to agree with your approach.
Yeah, I think I get along with everybody that agrees with me.
You get along with everybody that agrees with you? You're right, and hopefully everybody knows you're right.
I have to talk about that. I need to get along with people who do it.
As long as we're yes people, whatever, that's okay. When to avoid? When an issue is trivial. I always bring up the example, if someone comes up to me, well, where are you going to go for lunch today? I say, well, I can eat almost anything. So you pick the place, we'll go. You don't need my input. Just pick a place and we'll go there. But there, obviously there's other issues in it, but I kind of like that. When they collaborate. Sometimes when you need to, it's helpful when you need to combine ideas to get the way you want to go. When you want to compromise, kind of a backup when collaboration or competition fail, you want to expedite a solution, and that compromise a lot of times is the approach. And sometimes when there's a temporary settlement, like I said before, sometimes you can get at least a short-term implementation of a solution that may not be a long-term because it's not completely bought in by both parties. And then we want to talk a little bit about negative consequences of each of these 5 different conflict styles. And that with the accommodating one, you do have obviously decreased influence. And that some people, because they feel they're maybe giving away too much, their self-esteem may be undermined. And also, if you don't really fight hard enough for your solution, the best solution may be lost as well. Negative consequences of competing. Eventually, like Carl's situation here, and that surrounded by yes people. As long as you say yes, that's it. And it's reduced communications. A lot of times, people take the approach, it's my way or the highway. And that, you agree with me, and those are the type of people I refer to as the boss, that you might get their agreement for the short term for the one situation, but because they're turned off by your approach, in the future, you're probably not going to get their cooperation. And that's because you have that personality issue to deal with. You get a lack of commitment from others if they feel it's forced onto them. Negative consequences of avoiding. They're made by default. Obviously, you didn't have any input to the decision. You didn't have a creative input. And you may be put off by it for some reason based on what the ultimate decision is if you didn't feel part of it didn't feel part of the ownership of a particular issue. And negative consequences of collaborating. And that, because it does take a lot of time when you get in a collaboration mode of operation, especially if you do have some somewhat diverse ways of approaching the problem. It may take quite a bit of time to have a discussion and work out issues so that you can agree to work together and so you both get what you want. And here they talk about, compromising, where essentially each side, because it's a partial agreement, acceptance of each side, then each side may not really buy into the situation because they think they gave up too much. So that they're not completely satisfied. The solutions tend to be short-lived because people are not looking at it being long-term. They're really just not happy with the situation. And here's just a couple items we want to talk about conflict control. Just different things to keep in mind. That some of these items were addressed in some of the previous slides, but you can use avoidance just to ignore the issue, let someone else worry about it. You use the commenting style to allow the other person to resolve the issue. And like we said before, especially if it's someone in your group and that, and give them an opportunity in a non-threatening environment to fail and learn from that failure. And here's a few steps we want to talk about on confronting conflict. And sometimes it's good to explain the situation as you see it. I see the situation this way, and then ask their viewpoint, so you get a better understanding. What do they feel about the situation? How do they understand the situation? Maybe you have, in your two different perspectives, you don't understand the problem in the same way. And by you explaining how you see it and them explaining how they see it, you can see, is there a commonality there or is there a big difference? And there too, and at the next point, you need to agree on the issue independent of personalities. You need to look at the facts, the information, and try to keep the personalities out of it. Here's a few more steps for confronting conflict. You need to obviously be open to explore all possible solutions, and that don't close out things right away. The whole brainstorming issue is no bad idea at first. Let's be open. Okay, I guess, now we covered a lot of information. I know it's getting towards lunchtime. So I think what we're going to do is end it right now, and then we'll cover problem solving and decision making after lunch. So hopefully during lunch, have an opportunity to talk things about things. If you have any questions about what we covered this morning, I'm more than willing to discuss those. But don't feel that our discussion need to be limited to the workshop. You can